All right. So I think good morning, everybody. Good morning, ladies. Good morning, folks that are coming on.
Morning.
Um, I know that it's still have a couple of minutes. So people are just coming in. I love when I see people that I know. And so it's so nice to see everyone. Hi, Veronica. Oh, so excited to see you. Um, all these folks who just had people leave. Sam's mom, Susan, yay. Hi, Susan. I just had people leave to go to college. So I'm thinking of you. I'm thinking of you all the time. And I suppose everybody can hear me, but you can always feel free to test out the chat if you want, um, and say good morning. So I'll say good morning to everyone. Yay, good morning. Hi. Hi, Lindsay. Of course, Lindsay Tom's in the background here. Hi, Jen. How are you? So nice to see you guys. We have about 1 minute. And so um, we'll go ahead and just wait that 1 minute and then we'll kind of kick things off. So I guess it's 9 o'clock. So I will, in the spirit of being an executive function and study skill center, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off right here on time. My name is Debbie Rosen, and I am one of the owners. I'm the founder and one of the owners of the StudyPro. Lindsay Toms is in the background, is the other owner. And of course, we're so excited to have Dr. Jones and Dr. Chirby here. But both, I just noticing your name, uh, Dr. Jones says Brenna on there, so Brenna Chirby. So you're both Brenna Chirby, but you might want to wave in case people haven't met you before.
I'm
The
Brenna.
real, yeah, the real Dr. Jones, please stand up. So we're so glad that you can join us this morning. And this is kind of a sneak peek into some of the content that we're going to be covering at a live summit, one of our first live events at the StudyPro in quite a while. And we're going to talk about that. But if you don't know who the StudyPro is, I thought I would share a little bit about us. So we are an executive function and study skills center, and the students that kind of walk into the door here often come to us, they're super smart and super capable, but they feel stuck. And why do they feel stuck? Because school is really more than just about the content, like the math or the writing. It's really very much about the process. And I often use this analogy that, when we learn to ski on the green hills and we think we're such great skiers, right? And that's a little bit like elementary school. And that's the one-page math or the vocabulary words we have to read. But then as we get into middle school, all of a sudden it gets steeper and we get into the blue hills and we're like, oh my gosh, we're now having to manage the, longer term papers or the assignments and the projects. And that is just a little bit harder. And so we start to believe that because we can't fully manage the content without any additional skills, that we are challenged, with our IQ, or we're not so smart. We should just be able to do that. And if we just had a plan, then everything would be great. But the challenge really is that school, as we know, especially in middle and upper school, and as we get into college, is much more about um, just getting the work done and very much about being able to manage that. So our approach really isn't about handing kids, another list or even a plan, but it's really about helping the students notice the barriers that get in their way. Because as I've said a million times, if you ever listen to me, we don't want our kids to be great at doing homework. We want them to be great at doing hard things. And that's a little bit of a preview of what allowed me to bond so much with these incredible ladies, because there's so much more synergies between what we do and what they do in terms of, the skills that you need in the classroom as well as on and off. And so we approach kids and students to help them build those skills in a number of ways. And we won't go through all of these, but the idea is that it's really about, how do I find my work? How do I understand what the barrier is between starting? How do I understand what I need to organize it? And it's not just the mechanics, for example, of the writing. So that's really what we're trying to help students do, being that expert guide so they can build the confidence and the skills to say, hey, I can really notice what's holding me back. So that's a little bit about the StudyPro. We have a lot of programs, and we'll go through them, but this is a picture of our brand new course, Gain the AI Edge. We have two versions of that. One is for high school, and one is actually for parents that we're going to be doing during the school year. And the purpose of this workshop is to help students better understand those barriers by looking through the lens of, how can I better start, understand, prepare, improve, and advocate? And as you clicked through, if you would click through each one of these tabs, you'd see. And then we have the ability to use AI within this context to help them see how they can use different AI tools, not just ChatGPT, but for example, ChatGPT to help them break work down, help them better understand material, to help them better advocate. And if you are a parent that is interested in how to better help their students, we also have a parent view of the workshop. We've had these over the summer. They've been incredible, just the parents bonding and feeling that they can build a different relationship with their kids other than just, hey, have you started your work yet? Or don't you have homework? But how can we sit down next to our students and help them really themselves guide them to understanding what's the barrier between them and starting their work, and how can they use some of the tools that most kids are really already using today. We also do study skills and strategies courses. We have some coming up for 4th and 5th graders. One is starting October 1st. We just started a course for middle school and high school, but our next round is starting October 19th. So time management, organization, breaking work down, how to study for tests, etc. And then we also have a brand new workshop that we're super excited about for this school year. It's not brand new to us, but it's new in terms of we're planning it for the fall. So we have a middle and high school day. We have a high school day coming up that we'll talk about also. But the middle school free workshop to how to get stuck and start writing is on October 25th. So that's in this space here, and it's free. And we'll be sending something out about that. So if you're on this, you'll get that information. And every month we have these webinars. Most of you know about them. These are the next two speakers that we have coming up, both authors, speakers, and just very inspirational women. I think there's a theme going here, and so we're super excited about those. And again, you'll get these invitations. And one of the things we're very, very proud of is partnering with Dr. Jones and Dr. Chirby and all of the folks that are here. You can see on these pictures for a broader summit on raising resilient athletes. And again, if you like what you see here today and you're local and you'd like to come in October on the 17th, we are having a panel discussion. Lindsay and I are also going to talk about bringing those same skills into the classroom and into the work that students do, and how to break through those invisible barriers and the challenges that you'll be hearing a little bit more about today. So please spread the word about the workshop, about the summit, on October 17th. And we really hope to see you there, because it is magical to get everybody in the same space. And I think Lindsay just put the link to that, which is on our website and will be on everybody's website soon. So with that, I am going to introduce these two incredible women. It has been such a privilege to work alongside them in planning this and also planning the summit. Both have been psychologists for over 20 years, but what brings them together, especially around the topic today, is not only have they been parents on the sidelines, parents of for students and adults and psychologists, but they've also been parents on the sidelines of elite sports for also over a decade. And they have seen all the things that probably motivate you to be here today, the heartbreak of being placed on the B team, the excitement of making that top 10 program, the challenges of injuries along the way, all the things that I know as a founder of this center, we've all had our personal experiences that bring us this passion. And what makes our work with Mind Balance Sport so powerful is how they bring both their mental health expertise and their personal expertise together, and their clinical expertise. So for me personally, it's been really enlightening just to see how much crossover the mental skills are that they'll be talking about today with the executive function skills that we talk about always. And so with that, I'm wanting to give a very warm welcome to the real Ginger Jones, Dr. Ginger Jones, and Dr. Brenna Chirby. If you weren't here at the beginning, they both say Brenna on them, Brenna Chirby, but at least for me, the top one is Dr. Jones. So I'm going to stop sharing and allow you to share, Dr. Chirby, and welcome everybody that's here. We really appreciate having everyone, and I'm going to go ahead and put myself on mute, but I'll monitor the chat. So if you have questions along the way, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Wow, Debbie, that was really quite impressive. The StudyPro is amazing and offers so much for kids and parents. So thank you for having us. Dr. Chirby and I are really excited to be here to talk about something that we've been doing for many years in our clinical practices, working with student athletes. But like some of you, we're also parents to athletic children and have stood on the various sidelines, watching our kids on the field and in the classroom, really asking ourselves, who is teaching these kids mental skills? So after lots of conversations and many, many years later, we founded Mind Balance Sport about 3 years ago because we wanted to share our knowledge about how to help kids develop mental skills in order to improve their performance.
And before we jump in today, I just want to let everybody know that the skills that we're going to talk about today are really just a small sampling of many, many skills that we use in teaching student athletes, but there was no way to cover them all. So we picked 5 that we tend to use a lot, but they are just a small sampling. And just to reiterate what Debbie said, we're really excited about the summit coming up. We'll talk more about it at the end, but the local experts that are the panelists that work with student athletes across a variety of forums, I think it's going to be really powerful, and we're really excited about it. So, well, again, we'll talk more about it at the end, but if you are intrigued by what you hear today, you'll get even more then. What we're going to talk about, right? The 5 skills are self-talk, overcoming fear and adversity, or what some people like to call mental toughness, goal setting, which I also noticed was on the StudyPro slide. I'm not surprised, right? So you'll hear lots of overlap today. Visualization and post-performance reflection. So those are the 5 areas we're going to hone in on a little bit today. And sports psychology is a research-based field. It really came out of research with athletes and then moved into lots of other areas of performance, but it's also very subjective. So the work that we do with our athletes is very individualized, not surprising. It depends on the student athlete that's in front of us. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? That's going to shift. And of course, what they're struggling with in their sport. But in that spirit, we also hope that today, as much as you can make a webinar interactive, we're going to try to do that. And we have a few polls along the way, and Debbie has graciously offered to moderate the chats because I can't multitask that well. So please chime in as you have questions. If you have questions, probably somebody else is thinking of the same question. And we just find that people get a lot more out of this if we can tailor it as much as possible to what people are wondering about and thinking about. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to the real Dr. Jones.
Do you want to do the slide? Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Chirby. So before we actually get into, I'm going to delay one more minute, getting into talking about the mental skills, I wanted to mention an article that came out last month in the New York Times entitled, "What Sports Psychologists Want You to Know About Mental Toughness." It was very timely, and we were very excited to see it. In particular, they reference a study of more than 44,000 people who were briefly trained in sports psychology techniques like visualization and self-talk, who performed better on average against a computer simulated opponent than those who had not received the skills. The article really points out that the specific interventions that make a difference are not just for elite athletes, but can be applied to any endeavor, whether or not it's studying for a big test or giving a presentation or taking a driver's test. And really that article was music to our ears because we love it when our student athletes begin to connect the dots that they can use the skills we teach them in many areas of their life. So when we talk about performance, whether or not it's in sports or in school, the mental skills are as important as the physical and academic skills. Student athletes live in both worlds. They face the pressure of competition on the field, and they face the challenge of achievement in the classroom. And what's crystallized and so powerful for them to realize is that the same mental skills help them succeed in both areas. So things like focus and resilience and mindfulness and confidence, they're not just athlete skills and they're not just student skills, they're life skills. The difference is simply where and how they're applied. So this morning, we want to really look and dive into the parallels between athletes and students. And we'll see how training the mind helps young people handle stress, stay present, and perform at their best, whether or not they're standing at the free throw line or sitting down for a big exam. As adults, we know that success in sports and school isn't just about talent, it's about the mindset. The same mental skills that help athletes perform under pressure are the ones that students need to thrive in the classroom. I have a really simple example of one student athlete I worked with recently. Before every free throw, he used a very simple breathing technique to calm his nerves and focus on the shot. And when a test came along, or when his exam season came along, he asked me if he could use the same exact strategy before opening his test booklet. So instead of being overwhelmed by anxiety, he took a breath and he centered himself and he focused on one problem at a time, which he realized was not any different than one free throw at a time. So the powerful connections are made when our student athletes recognize that the skills like focus and resilience and emotional control transfer directly from the court to the classroom. And by developing them, student athletes don't just improve in one area, they build confidence and tools that they can use everywhere in their life. Next, Dr. Chirby is going to tell us a little bit about the specific mental skills that we're going to talk about a little more in depth before I start off with self-talk.
So one of the things that is helpful, and I'll be brief about it because I think most people know, but there is sometimes a misnomer between mental health and mental performance. And they are very distinguishable, even though they both apply to what we do. So on this slide, obviously I have some kids here studying, but I very specifically put a picture of Simone Biles, which I would imagine all of you are familiar with, and we view as an amazing advocate for athlete mental health. In the last two Olympics, she really prioritized her mental health, sitting out in one Olympics. And has been very verbal and vocal about how she struggles with anxiety and depression and how, as we obviously, those things impact her performance. And she's involved in a very dangerous sport if you're not focused and in tune with what's happening. And so, of course, for anyone, if they're having mental health issues, those issues are going to influence their performance in their sport, in their life, right? Anxiety, depression, ADHD, OCD, the list goes on. So we do have licensed mental health practitioners on our team who help student athletes who have issues in mental health. But what we're talking about today is mental performance and teaching mental skills, and that is separate from mental health issues. So as we talked about, things like self-talk, how we talk to ourselves in our head, thought interruption, overcoming adversity, because the one thing we tell our student athletes all the time, no matter how elite you are, even when you're, Michael Jordan or Federer or whatever sport, you are going to lose most and win some. Right? That is how the statistics play out if you perform enough, right? So adversity is part of the game. And similarly in academics, right? Eventually, if you're in academia long enough, you're probably going to struggle on an exam or an assignment right? So we're also going to talk about goal setting, visualization, and mindfulness. And then I also put a picture in here, just because it's one of my favorites. Many people in the audience are probably of a similar generation and grew up watching Grey's Anatomy. If you didn't, this is a picture of one of the characters, and she is a surgeon. And before a tough surgery, she would stand in what she called her Superman pose because it made her feel invincible, and she needed to feel invincible before going in and operating on somebody's brain. And we don't think about things like that, but it's a great example, I think, of how mental skills look different for everybody, and sometimes are things like posture and right. It's very teachable, and is across a wide range of performance areas, which is the other piece before we jump all the way in that people don't typically realize. Everybody knows that elite athletes use sports psychology at this point, and it is prevalent in most elite athletes, I think. But what people don't know is that it's used in a lot of other areas, including surgical teams and our military. All of the tactical teams use performance psychology. A Green Beret, a Navy SEAL, um, even the pit crews in NASCAR have a sports psychologist. So performance, classical pianists, et cetera, et cetera. So if your child is a youth athlete, this is all going to translate. But if they perform in any arena, including academics, you'll be able to see readily how many of these skills translate into life. So we're excited to be here, and I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Jones to jump right in.
All right. We're going to jump in talking about, in my opinion, one of the most powerful tools your kids can carry with them is not their gear bag. It's their inner voice. The way they talk to themselves has a huge impact on how they perform, both in sports and in school. Think about it. If an athlete constantly says, "I'm not going to make this shot," their brain starts to believe it. Just like practice builds muscle memory, repeating negative self-talk builds doubt. And on the other hand, if they practice phrases like "I've prepared" and "I can handle this," their brain wires for confidence and resilience. The same's true in the classroom. Before a test, positive self-talk can calm nerves and sharpen focus, while negative self-talk fuels anxiety. As parents, we can really help by modeling this ourselves by using positive self-talk. And when we notice our kids using negative self-talk, we can gently point it out. Because surprisingly, in our work with student athletes, we've learned that they're not quite as aware of how they talk to themselves as we are. So don't be afraid to point it out. For athletes, for example, when you hear them saying something negative, you can suggest that they practice something supportive. For example, "I'm prepared, I'm ready, it's one play at a time, I bounce back quickly." For students, similarly, "I'll take it problem by problem, mistakes help me learn, I'm capable." And as with most things in life, mental skills are not helpful unless they're practiced. So we have to encourage them to practice and use supportive phrases, whether or not they're walking into a game, a practice, or a test. So our brain listens to every word we say to ourselves, each thought, whether or not it's positive or negative. It's like repetition and training. And over time, these repetitions strengthen certain mental muscles. Our student athletes love the phrase, "Our brains keep score," and they do, because they reinforce whatever we practice the most. So self-talk is like mental training. The words we choose, they either build us up or they wear us down. And athletes and students can use the same mental skill to improve their self-talk. And to do that, they need to become really aware of the type of thought that they're having, and then do something that we in our work called reframing. So some examples of athletes that we work with sound like this. An athlete might say, "I always mess up under pressure. I didn't make the last shot. I'm not going to make the next shot." So we can help them reframe that by saying, "I've practiced. I can handle it. shake it off. And the result of that, with lots of practice, is that the athlete ends up, at minimum, playing with more calmness in difficult moments, which ultimately leads to more confidence. With a student, they might say, I'm terrible at math. I'm going to fail the test. A reframe is, similarly, I've studied, take it one problem at a time. The result for the student is it lowers their anxiety, they can focus better, and the research says then they perform closer to their true ability. So we remind our athletes, and this is really important, that when they reframe their negative thoughts, they need to be replaced with statements that are actually balanced and realistic, as opposed to, sort of super peppy and smiley when the situation really doesn't call for that. So for an example with an athlete, it could be, yeah, that was a tough play, that was a tough game, but I can reset and do better on the next one. Or for a student, that test was hard, but I've prepared and I can take it step by step. All of this builds confidence, resilience, and motivation while keeping performance grounded in reality, which is a really important tool. Because we find that student athletes come to us specifically with problems when they use the flip side of negative self-talk, which we call toxic positivity. And this is really where they dismiss their real feelings. They pretend everything is great, even when it's not. The stress and struggle is real. It sort of seems like they deny that. They might say things like, I never make mistakes. I'm always the best. It's somebody else's problem. Somebody else screwed up. Or for the student, they might say, I'm never nervous for exams. Everything's fine. The impact of that is that it then leads to denial or frustration and guilt, really, when the reality doesn't match the forced positivity. So this type of thinking leads to and plays a role in what we're going to talk about next on the next slide, which is dealing with setbacks and adversity. But I wanted to stop a minute and just ask if there are any questions about what we've talked about with regard to self-talk. Self-talk is probably the least sexy mental skill that we're going to talk about today. So if there aren't any questions, that's okay. But I did want to just stop and ask if there was any curiosity or questions about this concept of thought interruption and reframing or toxic positivity.
I have a comment. Love it, especially the toxic positivity point. So true and important to address, which I agree to. I love how, their inner voice is one of their most powerful tools, which I think is super challenging sometimes to do that. But I can imagine how incredibly important it is. And so I really appreciate that point. But I don't see any other specific questions.
Okay. Well, we actually wanted to stop anyway and check in and do our first poll on the next slide.
Bear with me, folks.
It's
It's a new skill. All right.
So we're going to talk about overcoming fear, setbacks, and adversity. We wanted you guys to think about what is the hardest part for your child when facing setbacks. Bouncing back quickly, staying motivated, managing frustration or nerves, not comparing themselves to others.
Lots of people are chiming in, so we'll just give it a minute.
Yeah.
Um,
And the good news is that there's no right or wrong answer.
right. And it looks like most people said managing frustration or nerves, but staying motivated is a very close second. And definitely people are responding to all four of those categories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
So, as we were saying, there's no right answer because often it's all of these. And we know that ultimately, if you're involved in things, they're not always going to go your way. And so, if they have trouble bouncing back quickly or staying motivated or managing their frustration or comparing themselves, those are all things that we can work with and have examples in continuing with our talk this morning about ways to handle that. So,
So Dr. Chirby, do you want to share the results on this, or did you do that already?
Oh, hold on one second. Thank you for chiming in about that. I thought I did,
And then
but
you can.
clearly I did not. Okay, here we go. All right, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then we could just stop sharing. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
so
Okay.
most people said managing frustration or nerves.
Yeah.
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 And while you're putting that back, there was a comment by Sally too, says, I feel like society and social media sends a lot of toxic positivity, toxically positive messages like, go girl, you got this, slay queen, etc. Which was, I thought, a helpful comment.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
move on. So,
Brenna, do you want to, can you press the red dot and then we can see the slide?
Oh, can you not see it? Whoops.
I can. I don't know. Are
I
others
can see it. Yeah.
polls?
Okay.
Okay. For some reason, I still have the poll up.
Oh,
But I
you
wanted
might be able to just stop sharing it from your screen too,
let's see. Here we go.
because I think since we're all co-hosts, we might have to just all stop
Got it.
sharing.
Thank you. And these are all skills that we're learning. Thank you. So
It's the first time.
yes, some examples I wanted to talk about within this slide that we see at Mind Balance Sport. Um, for example, student athlete would come in and they say, well, the student is standing at the free throw line, for example, with the game on the line, or they're striking out at bat, or they're missing a wide open shot. And in those moments, what they're dealing with is fear and disappointment, which can be really overwhelming. Similarly, when they've not done as well on a test or a paper, or they weren't accepted to a school that they were hoping for, or a club and they had their hopes set on, these moments obviously can be really upsetting. And as we know, as adults, what truly matters isn't about avoiding those setbacks, it's how we help our kids respond to them. So an athlete who misses the shot can either think, I always choke under pressure, or with support and reframe, that one didn't go in, but I'll focus on the next play. The same skill shows up in the classroom. A student with a poor grade can spiral into, I'm terrible at math, or learn to say with self-talk and reframe, I didn't do well this time, but I know what to work on next time. And as parents and as performance coaches and other supportive folks, we can help guide this shift, because the reality is that those things are going to happen, and how they handle it are really examples of what we call mental toughness and mental flexibility. So mental toughness, as Dr. Chirby said a minute ago, is subjective because everyone's setbacks look different. And how mentally tough and flexible you are comes down to the student's ability to really thrive in positive or negative environments. And there are two key factors that really sort of sum up mental toughness, and they are persistence and resilience. So in an athlete, persistence might show up with the athlete is dribbling fundamentals repeatedly. Resilience is mentally rebounding from a mid-game mistake or causing a turnover. And in a student, persistence is continuing to study even when the material is confusing or overwhelming. And resilience is recovering after a bad grade or harsh feedback. Mental toughness also impacts our confidence. And confidence is a skill. It's a mental skill that we have to be taught and then practice to strengthen. A trick to becoming more confident is to lean into your courage. A great example of this was from a recent Monday Night Football game when the starting young 22-year-old quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, was talking to his very seasoned wide receiver, telling him they just need to stay calm and don't give up. They were down 11 points and he had just thrown a pick six in the third quarter. And he told his offensive lineman on the sidelines, good things are about to happen. And then in the huddle, he asked his teammates, is there any place you'd rather be? So these are great examples of when things are not going well, to lean into positive messaging and courage. And in the end, he led the team to a big fourth quarter win. That obviously doesn't happen all the time, but I think we would all appreciate being around someone who is speaking at least with realistic expectations and also hope and positivity. Versus talking about how horrible at the game that we're in. So every time you study and push through a tough workout, every time you push through a tough workout or a tough study session, and you lean into the discomfort of that, because we all know that's tough, you're building the blocks built on courage and confidence. And the building blocks of courage and confidence are the mental equivalent of knocking off your longer runs if you're training for a marathon, or practicing your problems when studying for the SAT. Confidence affects your goals and psychological momentum. I want to take another minute here and take a break and ask if there's anyone that has any specific questions about what we've talked about so far with self-talk or overcoming fear and setbacks.
I don't see anything in the chat, but I have a quick question for you guys. So, we hear a lot about validation, and I think parents sometimes, when their kids are disappointed, they don't know how to react in terms of like if that game is lost and the kids are really disappointed, or maybe they're really frustrated, or maybe their parents are frustrated because the kids are behaving in a way that, it seems like they're not showing these mental skills. What role does validation play in all of this, and how might you react to a child that hasn't learned these skills yet and maybe is reacting in a more emotional way than you'd like to see them do for mental toughness?
Mm-hmm.
That leads me to, and of course, Dr. Jones, if you have other pieces to this, but as you say that, Debbie, it makes me think about, I'll often say to parents, like, when in doubt, just hug it out, right? If you're not sure what to say, just give the kid some time to process it and then go back and talk about, right? Because especially if someone's, behaving in a way that the parent is embarrassed by, which can happen, right? Your kid is really upset, they lost, they're throwing their glove down on the field and stomping off, or, lots of different ways that when kids get upset or dysregulated, it gets shown. Of course, there needs to be a conversation about how it's okay to have big feelings and big emotions, and that's normal and natural and comes a lot in sports, but how we demonstrate that. But in the moment when the kid is really upset, they're not going to hear you anyway, usually. So, I mean, of course, if their behavior is out of control, you have to intervene. But checking in with ourselves about, what is our reaction to this? And then just giving the kid some time to move through it before you can have a conversation about it is, I guess, my first reaction to that question. Because it does come up a lot, right? I mean, those are some of the calls we get from parents. My son or daughter is great in their sport, but we're noticing that their behavior, not so much. If they're not doing well, they sort of have a meltdown.
That's really helpful.
One of the images that I like to share with parents is to be the backboard to the ping pong table, right? Like they are hitting their balls and really wanting you to hit back. And if you're just the backboard and the ball goes back over to them, that means you're still there and you're listening and you're present, but you're not engaging in the same sort of hit back. You're just the backboard to the ping pong table. You're still in the game.
No, I love that. And it helps us too, because we need to speak to ourselves the times that our amygdalas don't take over. And there was a couple other questions that did come up um, about what if our child doesn't speak out about their struggles. I'll just read them all. I'm also curious if it's ever adapted to neurodivergent kids. And then there was a comment, the moment before the frustration kicks typically tends to escalate quickly. I'm wondering if there are some tips to help reverse that in the moment, which I think maybe you just spoke about, Dr. Jones. But the
Yeah.
other two questions were about speaking up about the struggles, if they don't speak up, and ever adapted for neurodivergence.
Yeah, the percentage of neurodivergence that we see is more than half. So all of this applies in some way or another, just sort of as a, you know, a theme to use. But as Dr. Chirby said at the beginning, it's all very individualized. But it's certainly not for it. How can I say this? The majority of kids that we see come in with things that are specific to them, and neurodivergence is very common.
And there's some theories actually out there in terms
Yeah.
of, is there certain parts of neurodivergence that help athletes, right?
Yeah.
And if we think about I call it the superpower of hyperfocus, you can quickly see where in certain sports that is incredibly helpful, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things you'll hear us say today, that we love about the work we do is kids are excited to do it. Like they're invested in their sport and they love their sport and it's fun. And so, if they're disrupting practice on the soccer field because they have ADHD and they're struggling with that and working on that in other areas, and oftentimes we find they're more motivated to fix that so they can keep playing soccer or figure out how to manage that, I should say, than they might be in the classroom.
Yeah, I would
So
be curious if the person who asked the question, are they talking about feelings about the game, or are they talking about when they said that they're not expressing their feelings? How do you deal with that? I think that was the question.
Okay, well, I'll let you guys move on, and then hopefully Elizabeth will provide a little bit more in the chat, and then we can, at the next break, address that.
great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk briefly about goal setting, and goal setting is something that I would imagine all of you are very familiar with, right? All of us are overachievers and overachieving kids where we live are familiar with goal setting. So I'm not going to waste everybody's time with the part that you know. But I do want to talk about process goals and how they are different than performance goals. And they are, in many ways, along with mindfulness and other tools, at the core of what we do. And the reason why they're at the core of what we do is because they support a growth mindset, which is another term I'm sure you've all heard, so I won't go into great detail about that, right? But if a student wants to get an A on a test or a certain score on the SAT, or they want to make a travel team or score a certain number of points or goals in a game, those are examples of performance goals. Process goals are goals that are more in your control, and they're the kind of chunking that you'll hear talking about in executive functioning. And controlling the controllables is a phrase our student athletes hear us and our performance coaches say all the time, right? Control the controllables. What are the parts that are in your control? And process goals are just that. So the example that we gave here on the slide is if someone has an academic goal in terms of a test, maybe it's completing their flashcards daily or reviewing their class notes within 24 hours, using a planner to track assignments. The last one here could be academic or performance related. Their process goal might be to refocus when their mind turns negative. And one of the things that we find with our student athletes is it's similar, part of what is important in what we do, and I would imagine this is very similar at StudyPro, is left on their own. They are far less likely to do it, even if they understand how to do it. right? And I tell parents all the time, it's kind of like a personal trainer, right? If any of you have had a personal trainer, which I'm guessing many of you have, after many sessions with your personal trainer, you know how to do the exercises, but you keep using your personal trainer because you show up, right? You're accountable and you work harder when you're with them than you're going to by yourself most of the time. And so in some ways, we're a personal trainer for mental skills. And I would imagine StudyPro is a personal trainer for executive functioning skills, right?
I use that example all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. And the great part for us is kids are motivated to do it. They like practicing these skills. They like coming in and telling us about, the goals that they set and how they met them. And um, so that's just a little bit about goal setting. I'm sure all of you have heard the acronym of SMART goals. There's lots of different acronyms out there. If you haven't heard it very quickly, it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. You can look it up if you've never heard of it, but it's used throughout business, academics, sports. And most kids have been exposed to goal setting, but when they haven't, then that's part of the work that we do. Um, and injured athletes is another segment of the population that we see a lot and work a lot with. And goal setting is particularly critical with them because their goals completely change as soon as they got injured. And of course, they have recovery goals and they work on those with their physical therapist. And we work in conjunction with them to help them meet those goals and use mental skills as part of that. But being adaptive, flexible, all the things that Dr. Jones was just talking about in changing their goals and keeping them fresh so that they stay engaged in their sport while they can't physically do anything is really critical. And all the research is increasingly showing us that kids who are injured, who work with a performance enhancement coach or a sports psychologist, they fare better. They have less re-injury, they return to sport better, less incidents of mental health issues. So that's just another area. And I'm just going to check in to see kind of how we're doing on time. Um, I'll just say very quickly that I do have, and this is personal to me, but I do have all my student athletes use a practice journal, and that's a quick tool you guys can take away. And the journal can be whatever they want it to be, right? A ratty old notebook or the notes section of their phone. It is better if they actually physically write it. As we know, your brain records it differently if you do that. But consistency is the biggest part about that. And just setting a process goal, not a performance goal, a process goal before every practice session and checking in with yourself after the practice session on how did you meet that goal? And if you didn't, what could you do differently? Just the act of doing that has a really positive impact on kids and their performance. And again, it's about fostering this growth mindset because sometimes their process goal in a training session might be to just stay focused in the drill they hate. Right? Right? That's a really small goal. It might take 2 minutes out of an hour practice. But if they do that and they're successful at it, they feel different about that hour practice than leaving and focusing on how their coach yelled on them on that drill because they were unfocused and then they focus on that. Right. So just as quick as good. So I'm going to move on so we get to the rest of our things here. And I have another poll for you, which I now hopefully know how to do. Oh, sorry. There we go. So asking folks to think about these questions. Has your child ever, that you know of, has your child ever tried visualization before a performance? So a routine, a game, a recital, a test. So, and the answers there, yes, regularly, yes, but only occasionally, no, but I think it could help, or no, and I'm not really sure it would work. So let's see where people are with at least what you know of, your kids have told you. Give it just a minute more as people are chiming in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it and share the results this time. And it sounds like nobody knows that their kid is using it on the regular. And some of you think they've done it, but only occasionally, and others think they haven't done it, but it could help. And there's a few skeptics in the crowd. So I'm going to quickly try to end the skeptics. Um, and let me, did I share the results? Oh, there we go. I thought I did. So everybody can see those. And I'll stop sharing them. Um, so for those skeptics, I'll quickly tell you about the University of Chicago study. It's a study that gets quoted a lot. They took college students and had them shoot free throws and determine their free throw percentage. And they were randomly assigned. Some had experience, some had none. And then for 30 days, every day, they broke them into three groups. The first group, the students practiced shooting free throws every day, 30 minutes or so. The second group, they didn't practice any free throws. They only visualized. That is, they imagined themselves in their mind's eye shooting a successful free throw. And the third group did nothing. They didn't practice free throws and they didn't visualize. And the results are here. The first group improved 24%. So those folks that practice free throws every day got 24% better, which is pretty significant, right? The second group, though, that didn't practice a single physical free throw got 23% better. I mean, it's amazing, right? If you think about that. And so, lots of studies since then have happened, and we've learned increasingly more about why visualization works. And in a nutshell, it's really all about activating the primary motor cortex. Right now, we can take PET scans of people when they're doing physical skills versus visualizing those skills, and we can see the same parts of the brain lighting up. And so that's why visualization, when done correctly, and there is right ways to do it or ways that are more likely to activate the motor cortex, that's why it works. It's like free reps. So you can imagine why this is so important with injured athletes who can't actually do the physical reps. And this study did not have a group that did both practice free throws and visualize free throws, but there's been lots and lots of studies since, and that is the best way to do it. You get the most bang for your buck that way. And visualization is not a replacement for physical practice. And in fact, just very quickly, if you visualize a skill you can't actually physically do, like I could visualize all day long myself doing a backflip, that's not going to help me do a backflip, right? Like until you can do at least an approximation of the physical skill, the visualization won't help. So let's talk about what makes visualization more effective. As it says here on the slide, you want to be vivid. You want to create that picture in your mind as vividly as you can of what's actually happening when you do it. And the way to do that is to use all of your senses. So what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? You know, is the temperature in the air when you're running outside, if you're track and field, whatever it is, make it as vivid as you can in your head. And then you also want to try to make it as real time as possible. So if it takes you, however many seconds to run a 50-yard dash, you want to visualize yourself doing it in that number of seconds, right? The other piece to that, and there's lots of other elements that we just don't have time to get into that help your visualization be more effective, but these are kind of the highlights of it. And of course, if you want to use this in translation with academics, for example, you want to do well on the SAT. You're not going to sit for hours and visualize yourself taking the test, right? First of all, you couldn't do that. It's too hard, but that's also not useful. You want to visualize little chunks of performance, typically in 10 to 20-second segments with lots of repetition. That's the other theme you'll hear from us, right? These skills work if you practice them. You can't pull them out the night before a game and imagine yourself scoring the winning goal and expect it to work. That's not how it works. You have to practice, practice, practice. Just like you have thousands of practice reps in whatever your sport is, you need lots and lots of mental reps. So questions about, and again, I'm aware of the time, but so maybe I'll run through the next slide and then we'll pull through questions, and I'll cut it. I'll try to summarize quickly the next slide, and then we'll ask questions. So the last thing I was hoping to talk about today is, whoops, sorry about that. There we go. Post-performance reflection. And I have another little poll for you here for people to think about with your students. Here we go. All right. So after a game, practice, test, whatever the performance is, what does your child tend to talk about first? Think about that ride home, right? Do they talk about the score of the game, the result, they won or lost? Do they talk about all the mistakes they made? Do they talk about what went well? Do they talk about how they felt during the performance? So folks are chiming in. This one seemed to resonate with people. They're rarely silent on the ride home, sometimes, but and in fact, we have a little worksheet that we give parents about the dreaded ride home. That's a whole nother talk. All right, let me end the poll here and share the results.
Food.
Food, yes, food. You gotta feed them. Okay, so it looks like, as you can see, lots of kids talk about the score. Did they win? Did they lose? Lots of athletes talk about the mistakes they made. It's the first thing they focus on. And after what you heard us say today, you can imagine what that does to all the neural pathways in your brain, right? And it looks like some of them talk about how they felt during the performance, but nobody answered that their kids get in the car and they're like, I was amazing. Did you see that? Right? That's interesting. It's interesting. So, that's why I picked this slide, because most of you know about pre-performance routines. You see the elite athletes doing their visualization or all the things that they do exactly the same before their performance. And yes, pre-performance routines are important. Getting your mind and your body ready to perform in the same way each time is very helpful. It's, it's why sometimes you'll have kids that are really, really anxious with test anxiety. If they can go to the place where they're going to take the test and practice getting ready for the test, even if they don't take it in that moment, right? That helps them because then they know what to expect. They know what the room's going to look like, that sort of thing. But that's all pre-performance routines. I want to talk about post-performance because nobody talks, or it's rarely talked about. And it's so supportive of the growth mindset. So having a conversation with their performance enhancement consultant or sports psychologist. What worked? What didn't work? What was effective? And for the losses, right, which there's always going to be more of than wins, lose most, win some. But what are you going to do different? And then that leads into all those process goals, which are things they have control over. And that's about the growth mindset. So, in the sake of time, I'm going to stop talking and pass the baton back over to Dr. Jones and questions that are coming in. And let's see where we kind of land.
Yeah, we have a couple questions. There was one from Dana. My child's been good at sports since a young age. Now in high school, they do not want to put in any extra effort, only want to practice in season when they're not involved with other sports other times. Now the competition will be better. I predict lots of, oh, well, I don't care, suggestions on how to motivate or handle the I don't care attitude. And, feeling like, oh, I just want to have fun instead of maybe excel or put more effort in.
Yeah.
Does that not match their goals? Right?
It's a good question.
When they say, I don't really care, and then they're going out, to try out for the top travel team. I think that's sort of where I would look first. What is their goal, and then versus what they're saying? Because what they're saying could just be a way to, have them, move on, have you move on, to keep them, away from having to deal with whatever they're thinking about. But I think you'll have your most sort of ability to sort of label the elephant in the room if it's not the same as their goal. Because if they don't care and they just want to have fun, then okay. But if that's not really what they're doing in their behavior, then I think it's easier to sort of go in and sort of label the elephant in the room as opposed to ask specifically about, why do you say you don't care?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And yeah, I understand. I think that's a really good point. And I know we had a couple other questions. I don't know if we'll have time. I know Dr. Chirby, you have to run right at 10, but we're not supposed to talk about the game after last night's game, after, yet we should. What's right here? What is right here is the question, I guess. It sounds like you were saying we should talk about it, and how do maybe we as parents versus the sports psychologists think they might be more open to talking about?
Well, and in general, letting your kids lead the discussion, right? I mean, yes, it is important for kids to have identity outside of their athletic identity. And we see this a lot, right? Especially in really high performing athletes, that even at a young age, it becomes, and of course, the stereotypical example is the mother or father was a college athlete or a professional athlete. And so that's the primary thing they talk to the child about or spend time with the child about. And that's on the extremes. But even for kids that aren't that high performing or didn't have elite athlete parents, when they start to be successful, it's really easy to start talking about that a lot and
Mhm.
less about who'd you sit with at lunch today and right like all the other things that you might be talking with them about. So I've gotten a little bit off track, but um, letting them guide those, like how much do they want or need to talk about it? If they're really
Mhm.
wanting to talk about it, then yeah, absolutely. And if they're open to those conversations around what went well and what didn't. But when a kid comes home from a game where they just played terrible, which happens, even to really good athletes. Some kids want to be left alone, and some kids want to talk and talk and talk and talk about it. And following their lead, really, in those
Okay.
situations, I think is helpful.
Yeah.
And I think, go ahead, Dr. Jones, did you want to say
No,
something?
I was just going to say, sort of reiterating that backboard image, of the
Mhm.
ping pong table, just sort of being there, but not sort of hopping over the net onto their side.
Yeah.
So, first of all of this was exceptionally helpful, really, really great. And for me personally, having a daughter who is a competitive dancer, it just brought so much to my brain about ways that we can better support our own athletes. And I think leaving on the note of being a backboard is so important, because it's important to always remember that it's not our anxiety that needs to lead about their performance and about their
Right.
goals and about their, yes, we want to motivate them, encourage them, and help them have healthy brains and
Mhm.
healthy goals and healthy activities. It's just hard sometimes, and I think that's a skill in itself, and maybe we just need to have a whole nother webinar about that. um, but this was so great, and the audience was so great. Thanks everybody for participating in the polls, and thanks Dr. Chirby and Dr. Jones. We're very much looking forward to everyone who can come here on the 17th and seeing you all here and expanding this conversation and being able to ask more and more of these questions. And we will send out the recording to this, and we will send out contact information for Dr. Jones and for Dr. Chirby to Mind Balance Sports. So if you have more questions, if you want to engage in terms of helping your athletes, I know that they would be happy to speak to you. So you can take the QR code if you're local here, and you can come to the in-person event. So first of all, thank you, ladies, so much. Thank you again to the audience, and I hope
Yeah.
everybody has a great
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, we can't wait to see you in October. Please come
Yes. Thanks so
from
much for having us, Debbie.
all the
Of
different
course. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
disciplines.
Have a great
Thank you,
day.
Debbie.
Bye.